Hello and welcome to episode 6 of What Makes This Song Special. This week's episode will revolve around the song True Faith by 80s English pop band New Order. As always, I will tell a little story about what this song means to me, why is it special to me, what makes it a significant part of the soundtrack to my life. I will talk a wee bit about Bernard Sumner's vocal style from a vocal coach point of view, and in part 2, as always, I will do a cover version, my own version of the song in question. So we'll jump straight in this week. I must have been about 13 years old when this story starts and begins, and I was living in a wee town called Waterfoot. It was in the south side of Glasgow. We just moved back from Italy for the umpteenth time, and we were renting a house in a street called Riverside Road. And it was quite secluded and quite out in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't really much to do, and most of my friends stayed in other towns, Clarkston mainly, because I went to school in Clarkston. So it was very hard to meet up with school friends and things. And what my mum and dad would do is they would let us go to, there was a place called East Kilbride Plaza, and this was it's probably one of the first shopping malls that I can remember in Glasgow or around Glasgow. More of the American US style shopping mall that we know about from the movies and from the American television programs. These things have become quite a big thing in Britain these days as well, and in Scotland. But when I was younger, in the sort of 80s and 90s, they weren't that common. Most of the time you just wandered around in the centre of town getting soaked in the lovely Scottish rain, and I think there was a great need for shopping malls. So there was a place called the Plaza, and it was in a town called East Kilbride. It wasn't too far, and my mum and dad would maybe drop me. Mum would quite often drop me and a friend off. By the time I was 13, that was as far as I was allowed. I was never allowed into Glasgow town by this point, but a shopping mall seemed safe. You dropped off, you didn't leave the shopping mall, and you get picked up 3 or 4 hours later. And we could do lots of cool things at the shopping mall. We would wander around the shops, and we would go to there was a shop called HMV, which is a kind of very famous British record store. I think it was been around since the 1920s, and you could go in there and buy posters and merch from bands and CDs and records and videos at the time, or DVDs of films and video games. So you could buy all sorts of things like that in HMV. Great shop to go to when you were that age. It was just really good fun getting into all these different bands and things. Back when CDs cost an absolute fortune as well. It wasn't like nowadays where you can listen to something on Spotify or Apple Music for next to nothing. But this was a really cool place to go, the Plaza. There was an ice rink in the middle of the Plaza as well, huge ice rink, and there used to always be girls there and girls from school, so we would think we were really cool and go up and chat to the girls from school at the weekend at the ice rink. And there was a cinema, or what in America you would call the movies. I know there's a few people watching from America now and had been commenting from the US, and so I'm always aware that I might be using different terminology for things. In Scotland, we actually call the cinema the Pictures. We've always called it the Pictures here. I think in Britain it's the cinema. In America, it's always like the movies, or I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but there seem to be a lot of different terms for that. But so we went to the cinema. It was our first chance at being a wee bit independent. We'd sort of gone to high school. We were 13. It was the first time that parents would let us off the leash a little bit, and we would go and wander about on our own with other friends. And I think we thought we were quite cool. We were becoming adults, and we had a wee bit of independence. So Michael and I were in a band at the time called Morph. We'd started this band called Morph, MORF, and it was our initials, Michael Oakley and Rico Frankie. As I've said before, I was at this age more into 80s rock bands and guitar bands, and I played guitar. But Michael was really into the Pet Shop Boys and Erasure and New Order and Depeche Mode and sort of 80s synth bands, and Michael's actually still into that stuff and is doing really well on the sort of synthwave scene. I'll maybe leave a wee link to some of his music that you can have a listen to as well at some point in the description. So yeah, so we'd started this band called Morph, and Michael at that point had the guts to sing. I didn't quite have the guts to sing yet. If you watch episode 1, I talk a wee bit about when I started to sing and how difficult that was emotionally. But Michael was really confident. He always sang, even in primary school. He would sing for everybody. He never really had an issue with that at all, with that confidence. So we would sit and try and write songs and lyrics, and probably most of the songs and lyrics back then were dreadful, but you have to start somewhere. And we had a wee band. He would stand at the keyboard, and I would stand with my guitar, and I'd maybe sing a couple of harmonies. Well, but we never did any gigs at that point. A couple of years later, we did do some gigs, and I'll maybe talk about that in another episode. Some funny gigs and funny stories from that time. So Mike was always famous for pranks. He was kind of the class clown. He would always have us all in stitches, laughing. He'd be constantly in trouble for misbehaviour. Never anything bad. Never anything, really bad. But he wasn't a bully, or he wasn't fighting with people. But it was funny stuff. He was always winding teachers up, and you never knew what to expect. So if we went to the plaza at the weekend, we would always know that Michael would pull off something hilarious that we could talk about for a couple of weeks. And still talking about them now. We'd be on the escalators going down, and there'd be a full load on the escalator of people coming down or whatever, and Michael would get to the bottom and hit the emergency stop button, and then shout something at them, and we would run and get chased by the security guards, or we'd go up to the payphones. Back then it was before the days of mobiles, a long time ago. We'd no mobile phones then, so we would have payphones everywhere. There'd be loads of payphones, and we would go up to the payphones, and Michael knew every free phone number. He knew every various companies that you could phone that were free phone, so we didn't have to put any money in the payphone. And Michael would pick up the receiver. What do you call that? And he would prank call various companies and people, and we would stand in the background laughing our heads off. He had this amazing ability to keep a straight face. So we would all be on the floor giggling, and he would just keep a completely straight face. He had his great ability to do that, and do these great accents and come up with these fantastic narratives and hilarious pranks on people. So he would get people to deliver skips to folks' houses and deliver food to friends' houses, and we would think this was hilarious. So that was our Saturday afternoons quite often growing up. At that point, we would go to the plaza, we would cause a bit of havoc and laugh at some of Michael's antics, and we would wander around record stores and dream of being the name on those CDs that we were buying. So that's where the story starts. I suppose we did that most weekends, and I remember the day that this story happened. We'd just been in HMV, and we'd bought a few different. I think I bought a Slash from Guns N' Roses poster, a huge big poster from my wall. It was Slash lying with all his tattoos, and he was sort of lying with his Les Paul guitar on train tracks. And I thought, oh, that's the coolest picture I've ever seen. I have to have that on my bedroom wall. So I bought a poster, and we'd been into Jeanster, which was a popular place to get cheap clothes. I think we bought some clothes in Jeanster with our pocket money, and we were walking up. Michael had just bought a single or an EP. It was 1963. It was called. That wasn't the year. I'm not that old. 1963 was the song by New Order, and it was a limited edition CD that he'd found. It had a really cool cover and box, and he was really chuffed. And all of a sudden, as we were walking back up towards the ice rink, these kind of older, bigger boys, older lads who were maybe a couple of years above us at school, they stopped and sort of started pushing Michael around, and I didn't really know what was going on. There seemed to be a backstory. I don't know if Michael had done something to wind this guy up, or maybe sent a skip to his house or something. I don't know, or maybe it was nothing. I don't know. But 3 or 4 of them were sort of pushed me into a corner, and then they let this guy. I think his name was David. I won't go into surnames and stuff. I'm not going to incriminate guys from 20 odd years ago, but I think the guy's name was David, and he started to push Michael around, and he was pulling his CDs out of his bag, and it looked like it was going to be, a fight was going to kick off, and we would definitely have lost. Not only were there more of them, they were bigger than us, they were older than us, and we certainly weren't fighters, especially back then. So, we were kind of shaken up by the whole experience, and at the end of it, the boy, he took Michael's new CD and he threw it in the fountain. He threw it in this fountain, soaked, and completely ruined it. And Michael was quite upset, and they wandered off laughing, and we walked away with our tails between our legs, gutted that we'd been sort of bullied by these bigger lads. So we decided to get Michael's dad to come pick us up from the plaza and cut our day short. And we headed back to Michael's house, and we got some snacks, and we kind of calmed down, and we sat, and we decided, we made plans as to how we were going to get these guys back, how we were going to get our revenge on these lads. I don't think that ever happened, to be fair, but we wanted revenge, and we planned some hilarious scenarios in our heads, and we sat listening to some songs and some music, and Michael had, I think he'd managed to salvage one of the CDs that he'd bought, or he just had the CD in the house. But we stuck on New Order, True Faith, and some other New Order songs like World and 1963 and all those types of songs. And although it wasn't my type of music, it really, I kind of get into it because we were listening to it, and it now I listen back and I always think of that time in my life. That was most folk at school were just going through the paces of classes and after school clubs and planning to do something kind of normal with their lives. And Mike and I were like, we're going to be musicians, we're going to write songs, and we're going to be big pop or rock stars. And we thought we were cool. I don't think our peers would have agreed or realised how cool we were back then, but we thought we were cool. So that's the wee story. Every time I hear New Order, True Faith, I always think about that day, and I think about the times we spent with all these very elemental ideas about becoming musicians and getting into writing songs and listening to new bands together and going to the plaza, the shopping mall, where we would meet up with girls and folk from school and go to the cinema and have a wee bit of independence. It was our first taste of adulthood, I suppose. So great fun. A wee bit about the band. New Order were formed in 1980, and they were kind of formed from the leftover band members of another band called Joy Division, who were a huge band after their singer Ian Curtis sadly committed suicide. So they rebranded the band, and Bernard Sumner, who had been the guitarist and keyboard player in Joy Division, became the singer. So that was the new project, was called New Order, and they released some very poppy stuff. Obviously songs like Blue Monday, and Blue Monday's quite often actually referenced as being the first ever dance song. So the first ever dance song, technically, even though a lot of people say it doesn't sound like a dance song. It was the first song to have a beat in it that was sort of unplayable by a drummer. I heard that somewhere. I don't know how true that is, but somebody claimed that it was the first ever or the start of dance music. So they had this sort of 80s synth dance pop sound that was quite unusual at the time. And as a singer, but Bernard Sumner, I don't have a lot to say about Bernard Sumner's voice. I know I've gone into a wee bit of detail with singers in previous episodes. From a vocal coach point of view, he's not a technically fantastic singer. I feel kind of bad saying that, but he's not an amazing singer, Bernard Sumner. He was somebody who could hold a tune. But I suppose the truth is that you don't have to be the best singer in the world to be a successful pop singer. I think that's the reality is not everybody needs to be Celine Dion, Eva Cassidy, George Michael, Freddie Mercury. You can have a voice that just suits the sound of a band, and I can't imagine anyone else singing those songs in a way that fitted the songs like Bernard Sumner did. So I don't want to slag him off. He wasn't a fantastic singer, but there's a difference between, and I talk about this quite often with students, there's a difference between being a great singer and being a having a great voice. You know, you can be a great singer, great technical singer, and have a really boring voice, or you can have a really interesting voice. Somebody like, I suppose, Axl Rose, who's it's the first person that came to mind, but Axl Rose has got a really unusual and very distinctive voice. Or somebody like Brian Johnson from AC/DC, or Bon Scott, or any of these guys, that they have really interesting, quite screamy voices. You wouldn't traditionally say that they were great singers, but they have a voice that suited the sound. And that doesn't mean they're not great singers. It's just a different way of looking at it. It's a different debate. So Bernard Sumner's voice it's an interesting voice. It suits, I think it suits the sound of New Order. But I don't have a lot to say about him technically, because as a technical singer, he's not a great technical singer. So, but there we go. That's today's episode. Kept it quite short this week. I suppose, in summary, it reminds me of my first experiences of the big bad world. A little bit of freedom and being let off the leash. Our first dreams of becoming songwriters and musicians. And yeah, just great friendships. And Michael and I are still best pals to this day. He's now in Canada. And doing some great stuff on the synthwave scene. If you want to have a listen to his music, I can send you a couple of links. So probably quite a few episodes where Michael features, because not only was he one of my best friends growing up, but he was also always, as I said, up to mischief, and those make for great stories. So I'll leave a link if you want to hear some of Michael's stuff. And yeah, please let me know if this song means something to you. What makes this song special or important to your life? What does it remind you of? Leave me a wee comment. Anybody wants to get in touch looking for vocal lessons, you can do so through Instagram, email, Facebook, a million different mediums these days, as everybody knows. So all the links are in the bio. And have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much.